What's going on, DFF Army? Welcome to another episode of the Always Be Building show. My man Ben, how's it going, bro?
I'm not too bad. How are you, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. This is Puma Drew with Dynasty Football Factory. Welcome, guys. We promise you another show this week. So we got Anthony Richardson versus Will Levis. And to a lot of you, Anthony Richardson versus Will Levis is not much of a competition. But here at Dynasty Football Factory, we're gonna break them down anyways. Kind of give our pros and cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, and really, show you guys what you need to know about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, other than the stat sheets and everything you already have heard up until this point. So yeah, draft is coming up next week, man. So
Yeah,
we're
it's right
getting
around the corner.
exactly, we're getting right down to it. So last week we did a little bit of our uh, quarterback rankings already when we did the Stroud versus Young, and both of us, I believe, I put out in my actual rankings, I have Bryce Young at 1, but
Yeah,
in my heart,
in your heart. Yeah,
Anthony Richardson is
that's
probably
what it is.
my favorite. Yeah, but
That's what.
that's
Yeah, we
so
mentioned
like
that in the
shooting for the
Discord today
stars.
with like the gut analytics. That
Yeah,
Anthony Richardson is just like the gut analytics guy.
yep,
He doesn't even
exactly.
have the highest grade out of the quarterbacks for me based on like my grading model,
Mhm.
but like he's my QB1. I don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
It's
All
just
right.
like with quarterbacks, sometimes you just gotta trust your gut sometimes
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like trust what you're seeing on tape.
Yeah, man,
So
absolutely, absolutely. So you were actually the first person that I heard that was like completely like, no, Richardson's my QB1. A lot of
yeah.
people are just not willing to say that for various reasons. But what do you see out of Anthony Richardson that makes you comfortable, even if it's a gut feeling? Like, what do you see that makes him comfortable for you to put him as your top rookie quarterback?
Yeah, you're right. I was pretty early to that QB1 train for sure. I've kind of been writing it since like February-ish, but
Mm.
I don't know. What it kind of comes back to for me is the Bills Chiefs game in like the second round a couple years ago when they were just going back and forth. That was like the one where Mahomes had the 10-second drive where he got
Yeah,
them in
yeah,
field goal
yep,
range.
yeah. The
And I
Tyreek, yep,
I had this feeling in my stomach when I was watching that game, like no one who doesn't have one of these level quarterbacks is ever going to be a serious team in the league. And then
right,
we saw that again with Hurts. He really stepped it up to that like top 3 level.
yep,
So it kind of just reaffirmed that for me that like you need to be chasing the ceiling. And
right,
like that's what we're all going for. So that was really what got me started with Richardson as QB1. And then as I got more into it, I kind of thought through the process from like a dynasty perspective too. And I think that the unique thing about Richardson is while he's labeled as a developmental guy, I think he has the highest floor in this class as far
okay,
as dynasty
okay,
goes,
yep,
just because of his athleticism. That there's no way he's not going to produce within like in the first few games that he starts. Like there's no way that he's not a good dynasty asset if he gets a shot on the field. And
mm-hmm.
everyone talks about this hypothetical if he gets top 5 draft capital. He's not falling past 7. There's no
Nah,
way.
nah, he's not
So
at this point.
yeah, I'm evaluating that as like a given, the draft capital for him.
Yep.
But I think that he's got the floor with the athleticism. And then the other thing for me that's really unique that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is his touch on the ball and his ability to layer it over linebackers and under safeties on a
Okay.
lot of. He makes a ton of these tight, high level elite throws.
Mhm.
And yeah, there are a ton of bad ones too. But the highs are so high, and there are so few guys who are making those throws on a consistent basis, kind of like he is. So
Right,
I'll
right.
pass it over to you, but those are just my like sort of initial thoughts on
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, no, absolutely. So
Richardson.
I feel like after the combine, there was such a from the guys that like Anthony Richardson, like they were on cloud nine after the combine because of all the athletic, like his RAS score. It was like insane, like all of that analytics after the combine. The greatest, like most athletic QB ever. With that is what it is. Like it's not a fluke or anything. He literally is by statistical measure. Um, but I think that the people that don't like Anthony Richardson are on the other side saying, okay, but none of that, half of that stuff that he tested with doesn't apply to a quarterback playing in the NFL. Like you
Yeah.
can't use his vertical playing quarterback. That doesn't, it's not a receiver. So I feel like after the combine, it got pretty muddied again on like what we should do with Anthony Richardson.
Sort of furthered the divide.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever was in on him was
Yeah.
completely sunken in, and then whoever was
Yeah.
out was just like doubting it again. So, but no, I agree. I like Anthony Richardson for his ceiling. Now, of course, everybody's saying like, yeah, he doesn't have experience, and which he doesn't. He doesn't
Yeah.
have. He has the least amount of experience out of the top four. I think he played 22 games.
Yeah.
He's only
Easily.
started 22 games.
Yeah.
So of course, like he is not going to go into the NFL day one, and I think he like is immediately going to sit behind someone,
Yeah.
whether it's like whether we wait like 4 weeks, 8 weeks, a year, whatever the case is, he's going to sit. So taking that into account, like we already know he's a project quarterback, but that project could be translate into fantasy points very easily, very early because of his rushing upside.
That
So
is another thing that I want to talk about
yeah,
while
go
we're here
ahead.
today is I think that there's this like developmental quarterback fallacy where people think that some quarterbacks are purely developmental guys and
Mm,
some guys just aren't.
mm.
But I think that really everyone's a developmental guy. No
Oh
one no
yeah,
one
yeah,
goes right from college and is ready. Everyone has stuff that they have to work on. They all have stuff that they have to iron out. They all have questions that need to be answered. And to me, if everyone has a risk, you need to be going for the reward. So
right, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So for me, like if we're so drafting Anthony Richardson from fantasy perspective, we already know he's going to get first round draft capital. It's a matter of like, can you, if you're drafting that high in your rookie draft, unless are a contender and somehow gotten like top 5, top 6 picks for the rookie draft, you got to be going into it realizing that you're not starting Anthony Richardson in your super flex spot right away.
yeah,
Like you're gonna have to stash him, but you're picking him basing on his complete ceiling, which I think his ceiling is like whatever Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson's is. That's what Anthony Richardson is from
yeah,
fantasy football perspective. NFL perspective, I'm not too sure. It's tough. It's hit or miss on QBs with rushing upside and him not having that much experience collegiately.
definitely.
Um, but yeah, I'm all in on Anthony Richardson. A lot of guys that I play with are not so thrilled with him. There's a lot of NFL teams that are not so thrilled with him, but to me, he's a pick that in a project that's worth taking that risk on. That I wouldn't even be surprised if somebody takes him 101 in a
Yeah,
dynasty draft. Like,
you can't blame the process there.
no,
Not at all. The other thing with Richardson, though, that I will say is that all those people that you're talking about, they're kind of right in a lot of ways.
mm,
Um, he I mean, a 53% completion percentage in college is really scary, and
right,
projecting that
right,
to go up when he goes to the NFL, you're never going to be able to convince an analytics guy really that that's going to happen.
right.
And then to go on some other weaknesses that I will admit as an Anthony Richardson truther, I don't think he's a very natural or instinctive runner. Like I think that he
Yeah,
has that raw athleticism, but
mm,
he's not like Lamar is a great example of a guy who knows when to cut, where to cut,
yeah.
how to
He runs
manipulate
like a running
defenders.
back.
I
Like
don't think
yeah,
Richardson is really like that. He runs kind of like Josh Allen, where like
hmm
he looks a little bit clunky, but he's just so big and so strong that it doesn't really matter.
right.
So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Josh Allen runs like he's just running to get yard. Like that's it. Just let me just
yeah,
run, get out of the way. Let me just make something happen. Lamar Jackson, to an extent, Justin Fields from last year, which I didn't think we would see out of Justin Fields, but they like know what they're doing with the ball in their hands.
yeah,
Like, making certain cuts, jump cuts, spin moves, like that's all looks natural to them. And for Anthony Richardson, that doesn't look too natural. He can get there because of his speed and his size, like you said, but um and a lot. So who would you? Of course, we just rattled off a few Russian quarterback names, but who's your closest comparison for a Rich?
it's Josh Allen to me. I think that
Mm,
has to be the comparison. And maybe I'm aging myself a bit there because maybe Cam Newton's a better comp for him,
mm,
but I don't know, that blend of arm talent and size. It's that archetype of just like the specimen quarterbacks. That
Yeah, yeah,
that's the group. That's where he has to be grouped into.
yeah.
And I think that he's a little bit different to Allen in that like some of the stuff that he has to work on is different than Allen. They
Okay,
both have footwork concerns, but I think that pocket awareness and pocket movement is probably Anthony Richardson's most underrated strength.
okay.
He has the lowest pressure to sack rate of anyone in this whole class,
Mm,
even like Bryce Young, whose pocket awareness is really his thing.
mm.
Um, so like, yeah, that part I think is really underrated. So if I had to comp him to someone, going back to your question, it would be Josh Allen, but really
Okay.
it can just be any of those like alien kind of quarterbacks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So mine would be, I might be aging myself, but mine would be Cam Newton. Even watching him like Cam Newton always had the arm talent, but everybody just kind of knew him as the rushing QB from Auburn. But he carried a team of no, like you can't name anybody from that Auburn team that went anywhere in any draft. Any like
You're right, I can't.
can't no, there's nobody on this. It's just Cam Newton. Can't name anybody in the
No.
defense. Nobody, not off the top of my head at least. So
Yeah.
he carried that team, and with his arm and his legs.
Yeah.
So physically and with his legs, like yeah, that is what Anthony Richardson looks like. That's the build. That's he's got it all, and he's athletically closest to Cam Newton.
Yeah.
At just his arm and his accuracy, like you were saying, are not there. His
Yeah.
processing ability, like it's just not. And Cam Newton, right away, like you said, like every quarterback is not. They all need development. Cam was like the starter day one, basically, and had some rough times his rookie season, but he figured it out because of how talented he was.
Yeah.
And I feel like that if given the opportunity, Anthony Richardson would be able to figure it out.
I
It's
think so
just a
too.
matter of at what point is that going to come in to whatever team he goes to. So
Yep.
rolling right into that, where do you see him? Not where do you see him going? We all know he's going top 10, but what do you think the best fit for Anthony Richardson is for us fantasy guys to get rolling right away? What do you think's the best spot?
Sure. From a fantasy perspective, that's trickier. I'll go from an NFL perspective
Yeah,
first.
go
I
ahead.
think that
Yep.
the Colts, or we could say the Colts for any of these four guys. They're
Yeah,
really they're
yeah,
really set
yeah.
up well. But for Richardson, especially with Steichen just coming from Philly and what he did with
Mm-hmm.
Hurts and that jump that he made, you have to like wonder how nice that could be, even if it means he goes there and he sits for a year, 2 years. Um, I don't know behind who. I don't know who they have over there, but that could be really good for him. And being with that kind of coach who's coached up that kind of raw talent before, I think could be really good for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a Raiders fan, I really, really want him to go at 7,
Mm,
but I acknowledge that's probably not the best landing spot. It would be cool for him, I think, because he could sit behind Garoppolo,
yep.
and then whenever he's ready, he has a super veteran Devonte Adams to throw to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I acknowledge that I don't trust Josh McDaniels to develop him nearly as much as I trust any of these other potential quarterback landing spots.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I don't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Josh
no, you're good.
McDaniels. I would not. Not with Anthony Richardson. You kind of need some
Makes me really
just
sad,
somebody.
man. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's what's best.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree with you. The Colt, of course, the Colts. The Panthers, I wouldn't mind. That I don't see him going first overall. That's the only problem.
Yeah, I don't think
But
that's gonna happen either.
no,
The way
but
it's looking.
that would be a good spot,
Yeah,
especially for not only a young quarterback. Like it's good, of course, to have a quarterback to sit behind and watch and learn from. But it's also good if you have solid veteran weapons that you can go to when you're
definitely.
scrambling, when you need, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
they can, as much as a quarterback can give a younger QB feedback, so can pass catchers, running backs, whatever the case may be. So if in Carolina, if he's throwing to Adam Thielen, if he's throwing to um who else is it? DJ Chark, like not that Chark's really a veteran yet, but you know, some
He's getting there.
yeah, he's getting there. He's getting there. He never turned out to be who I thought he was, but anyway, but yeah, like he has a little bit of stability on offense for weapons that
Yeah.
I think that would be a good spot for him. But
Indy's the dream for him for sure. I think that Seattle and Detroit, if they want to, would also be really nice landing spots. But
mhm,
I think that that would kind of suck from a fantasy perspective because then you're looking at maybe a 2 or 3 year wait,
right,
kind of like
right,
what we're seeing with Jordan Love.
right. Yep.
So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, man. I'm hyped. I'm hyped for next Thursday for sure.
If he goes to Seattle,
Yeah,
does that change where you say Bijan's off the board, and then there's Stroud,
yeah.
Young, and Richardson, but Richardson's your top guy, and he goes to Seattle? Are you still taking him first, even though you're anticipating waiting 2 seasons at least?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'd probably go with whoever Carolina takes in that
Okay.
case
Okay.
because at a certain point you have to factor in the weight. It's like you're essentially rostering a Devy guy at that point because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Gino just got locked down for 3 years.
Yep.
You have to imagine he'd start all 3 of those years while
Right.
Richardson is sort of developing. And again,
Yep.
I think that would be pretty great for his NFL prospects. Like I
Hmm.
think that that would be a great career trajectory for him, but
Yep.
I'm not sure that's quite the fantasy landing spot that we're all hoping for.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. So going to the next guy,
Yep.
Will Levis, quarterback out of Kentucky, transfer from Penn State. This like earlier on, I want to say more like around this time last year, Will Levis and Anthony Richardson were basically on the same tier of quarterback, like rookie quarterback. If you did rookie ADP at that point, obviously that's super early, but Will Levis at one point was considered like he might go first overall in the draft. That was his like when he transferred to Kentucky. That's what everybody was saying after that first season. Like, okay,
Yeah.
he's got all the tools. Like he could do it. Now, I don't mind speaking for the majority of fantasy community. Everybody is off of Will Levis. They're
Yeah.
just throw him in the garbage. He's not going to be anything. What is your take right now? We're a week away from the draft on Will Levis. What have you seen on tape? What's your overall take on Will?
I think the fantasy community is in for a super rude awakening with Will Levis.
Okay.
He's currently, or not currently, a couple days ago, one of my friends sent me a screenshot that he was the betting odds favorite to be the number 2 overall pick, which
Mm,
is crazy. But when you sit down and think about it for a second, we've all heard this thing about Stroud having the same agent as Deshaun Watson.
mm.
And with the Panthers looking like they're taking Young at 1, you'd wonder, would Houston, in the most Houston Texans move possible, would they take the consensus QB4 at 2
Yep.
because of Deshaun Watson's agent situation?
Right. Right.
I could totally see it happening. I am not ruling that out at all. I think it would
Yep.
be insane. It would scare me away from Levis 100%.
Oh yeah.
I would
Oh
want
yeah.
nothing to do with him, but it
No.
could really happen. And when that happens, people are going to realize that they were too low on Anthony Levis, well, on Will Levis in their pre-draft process.
Yeah.
I think that the Zach Wilson comps, we talked about this last episode, but the Zach Wilson comps are absolutely outrageous. They are not similar in many, many ways. As far as the traits go, I like he has the quick release, which everyone
Mm.
sort of fawns over.
Yep.
He has a great arm. He throws a great deep ball. He's decent with like layering, like I was talking
Mm.
about with Richardson. But I think he really, really struggles with poise. And this is to me
Yeah.
the biggest difference between these two quarterbacks is
Okay.
Anthony Richardson looks super calm in the pocket. He moves
Mm.
super well. He doesn't really get phased by pressure. And like one of his elite traits that we all talk about is his escapability.
Mm.
Levis, on the other hand, I think has a bad habit of missing a lot of free pass rushers,
Mm.
and he kind of gets spooked in there, and he looks a little bit like I heard one time Baker Mayfield get described as treating the pocket like it's Vietnam. Will Levis
Mm.
has a little bit of that like syndrome where he gets super jittery in there, and then the throw comes out bad because his mechanics were off because his
Yep.
feet weren't properly set.
Right. Right.
His pocket movement I think is okay, but it's just like the awareness part is a
Okay.
little bit lacking to me.
Yeah.
So I'll pass it over to you for your thoughts on
Yeah.
Levis.
I feel like I disagree with you a little bit here where it comes to Levis and Richardson's processing, I think they're pretty similar. They just do it differently, which I guess maybe that is agreeing with you a little bit. But they like Will Levis panics in
Yeah.
a like they both don't do well under pressure because like Richardson makes it look like he's okay and it's smooth, but then whatever pass he makes doesn't get to the quarter to the receiver or it's thrown over him or whatever, which is why he had the inaccuracy issues. Will Levis, on the other hand, just flat out panics and decides to, well, the ball's got to get there somehow and try to beam passes in or make, like you said, his mechanics get thrown off because he's running or, sliding out of the way or whatever the case may be. And it turns into an interception. And a lot of people's issue with Will Levis is that his interception rate is like way, not his well, his completion rate, interception rate, whatever you want to call it for, especially him for last year, is just like way too sporadic and all over the place. And they're
It was a tough year for him, man. It
yeah,
was
it
a
was,
really
it
tough year.
was, it was, yeah. And I thought he should have started when he was back at Penn State, like his sophomore season. I
Yeah.
thought he should have been starting there for a while, and they just kept letting Clifford be the starting QB. But that's for another day. But um, yeah, with Levis, when it comes to people like scouting him and everything, I think they try to put Richardson and Levis kind of in the same box, except for the rushing upside. And I
Sure.
think because of the Levis's arm, they think everything else should just automatically come with that. Like if you have a cannon for an arm, how come you're not able to process this way? How come you're not able to, like, why don't you have all the same things that Stroud does, basically? But I feel like if you put Will Levis on Ohio State, you'd be able to see that he is a good quarterback. Like he's not. It's just the narrative on him is getting completely blown out of proportion, I think.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
In the most
yeah.
recent DFF mock, I got him at like 15 overall, and I swear to God, Keishon Butte went above him, or Butte went
Yeah,
above
yeah.
him, like literally the spot before.
Yeah,
It's
that's not
crazy
yeah.
how low he's going right now, and like the
Mhm.
discount if you're drafting right now before the NFL draft, go scoop up Will Levis at the top of the second. Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's such great value for him there.
Who,
Yeah, you go ahead.
oh, yeah, who would you compare him to in the NFL for Will Levis's comp?
The unoriginal comp that I have is Carson Wentz.
Okay.
Everyone comps him to Carson Wentz. I see it
Mm,
too. Little bit like weird mechanics in the pocket. They both kind
mm.
of like take the snap and then like take one big step back and then just
Yep.
like wait and then sling it for
Yep.
the quick
Yep. Yep.
throws. I also see a lot of Derek Carr,
Okay.
which is a compliment and also an insult because Derek Carr throws a great deep ball. He has a great arm. He
Yeah.
has
Yep.
a great like flick, a little quick release, but his poise is really bad and his pocket presence is really bad. And he gets spooked really easily. He gets jittery.
Okay.
So those two to me are pretty similar. And they're also both pretty built too. Derek
Yeah.
Carr,
Mm,
strong, underrated athlete.
yep.
So I see a lot of similarities between those three. I'll say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I agree with you on the Carson Wentz one. That's a good one. I feel like his. I don't know how to not an actual player comparison, like of play style, but my comparison is I'm thinking more so like where would he fit in the landscape of quarterbacks if he was a like 5-year starter at this point in the NFL. Not that your comparison was wrong. I'm just saying like thinking
Like,
from
what do I
that.
think his ceiling is? Kind of.
Yeah, because that's where I don't hardly have a comp for Will Levis. I could never, as many times as I tried to, I could never think of an actual player that's like it's just tough for me because that would just be kind of going with consensus. So I always revert to like, all right, well, where do I think his ceiling is?
Yeah,
And for me, it's always been like his ceiling is like fantasy production wise or whatever is like Dak Prescott, and his
just about. Yeah,
floor is I don't know
it's pretty low. I'm
like a
not gonna
yeah
lie.
his floor is low. His
It's
floor
a
is
little
I won't even
scary.
say his floor just for sake of Will Levis, but yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like his like the best he could get is probably like a Dak Prescott
definitely.
archetype.
Yeah,
Like
I
yeah,
could see
what do
that.
you think? Oh
I could see that for sure. honestly, like from a fantasy perspective, that's probably attainable for him. But I don't really see him ever reaching that. Like Dak is like a borderline top 8 quarterback in the
Yeah,
league,
right,
or he has been, I should say.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know
He
if
has been.
he really is right now, according to the consensus.
Yeah, no.
But I don't think Levis is really ever reaching that level. The other thing we have to think about with him is that he's going to be 24 in October,
Mm-hmm.
and you're kind of like, all right, well, if he was going to figure out the issues with the poise,
Yep.
maybe he would have done it by now.
Right.
But I
Right.
don't really know. So
Yeah, no, that's true. And Dak Prescott gets compared to, like, everybody just calls him the Black Kirk Cousins. So I could see a Kirk Cousins being that type of like Will Levis just falls into that, for me, just falls into that group of,
yeah,
like, yeah, more
they'll have
so
the
Kirk,
same gene for sure.
yeah, exactly.
There's like
Like
that archetype of quarterback.
exactly, like more so Kirk Cousins, because it's just like, yeah, he's decent. He gets the job done. Like, he's always on a decent team, puts up good
Yeah.
stats, but you're never putting him in like your top 15 QBs in the league,
Yeah.
basically. Like, you know
I
what
can
I
see him
mean?
turning into like a Kirk Cousins. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not
yeah.
bad.
Like,
The Cousins
like,
car style.
yeah, like
It all makes
underrated in certain areas,
yeah.
overrated in other areas, but
That's
for
about as good as it'll get for
yeah,
Levis,
yeah,
I
but
think.
for fantasy, like if you're playing super flex, which most all dynasty leagues are super flex at this point, you can't fade a QB with first round draft
Yeah.
capital as much as we're doing it. It's getting kind of, and we're only a week out, but
All those guys we mentioned too, they're super valuable in
yeah,
Superflex. Like
absolutely.
those guys are great
Yep.
guys to have on your roster, especially
Y-
if you're a contender.
Yeah.
Having that in your QB2 slot is you're
Yeah.
pretty much set with one of those
And if
guys. So,
if they're on your rosters, but like Kirk Cousins, if he's on your roster, he's in your starting lineup. There's no,
yeah,
unless you
no, for
somehow
sure.
finagled, if that's basically having three top 15
Yeah.
quarterbacks in the super flex. You don't see that much. So
No.
he's definitely serviceable, of course. And I feel like Levis will be that.
Yeah.
But he's getting drafted like he's absolutely
He's
not.
getting
Like,
dragged through the mud, man.
yeah, he
People
is. He is.
really hate this guy.
Like, would you prefer to have Will Levis or Kenny Pickett for the next 5 years?
Will Levis.
Okay. So that's what so you got to put, like, if Will Levis was in last year's draft, he would be the first pick in the draft, or the first
I
quarterback off the
yeah,
board.
I
You,
genuinely think so.
yeah, as you know what
I
I
do.
mean. So we gotta pump the brakes, everybody.
We do.
Anybody
This is
else
a
in
call to
the
action.
DFF army, like, just yes, just please. I'm not saying taking one overall in
Yeah.
your rookie drafts or anything like that, or each second round in your startups. I'm not saying that, but just make sure your value is where it should be on a quarterback with potential first round draft capital.
Once you hit
That's
the
all I'm saying.
108, you should be thinking about Levis.
Start thinking, if he's still there, I will start thinking about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Even like
absolutely.
7 if you have no quarterbacks on your roster or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
He's in the tier with like Charbonnet, Addison,
yep,
Flowers, and Johnston for me.
yeah, yeah. So, like, for me, best landing spot for him. Uh, Again, you said, like, yeah, Colts is good for any of these QBs.
Yeah.
Um, I think Seattle would be a really, really good one for him, because especially for us, for playing Dynasty, him sitting behind Geno Smith, I think, is more valuable than Anthony Richardson sitting behind Geno Smith, because Richardson's going to get on the field. He would get on the field sooner than Levis, regardless, because of his mobility, his intangibles that Will Levis does not carry. He can run, but I feel like he runs like just to get a few yards. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he's not
Yeah.
he's not running with a
He's not a
purpose.
runner.
No, he's not a runner. He's not a runner. So I feel like him, like, actually learning how to play the QB position as much as possible, getting at least NFL learning and processing, because he is, like you said, he's going to be 24. So I don't know how much more he can develop his actual game, but that would be more beneficial in that type of offense, that type of team where he can sit for a couple of years. So, but yeah, man, yeah, Anthony Richardson is extremely a polarizing prospect. We haven't really seen one of these go. We thought it was Malik Willis last year, but that was not the case. We got to remember to let the NFL tell us who who's good and who's
That
not. The
is
draft always tells us.
absolutely, like, you cannot just like lock yourself into your takes before the NFL draft, because like
No,
they know so much that we don't know. Maybe,
right?
yeah, like, really, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's so much that we have no idea that factors into becoming a good NFL player. So,
Right, right. And we're only here to make sure you guys know that as well. So that's
yep,
we don't you might think we know a lot more than everybody else, but the NFL will tell us. We'll trickle it down to you guys on the next
yep,
episode. So,
for sure.
but yeah, no, it was good chatting it with you about A Rich and Will Levis. We'll see where they go in the draft. And of course, we will do a post draft show with Always Be Building. We'll talk about these landing spots for these QBs, and then we'll keep going throughout the spring and the summer, get
Yeah,
into a couple more landing spot shows. We'll do receivers, we'll do running backs, probably get into tight ends because this draft actually has some tight ends. So
yeah, it does.
definitely, yeah. So we'll definitely get into that and keep pushing out these videos for you guys. Thank you for all the likes and the feedback on the last one. Be sure to follow us on all the socials. Dynasty Football Factory. Thank you guys for tuning in. From Ben and Puma Drew. We'll catch you guys on the next one.